This is the Southeastern North Carolina Radio Reading Service, a United Way partner agency. We welcome you to its program entitled Off the Bookshelf. Your reader is Hiba Halb, and I will be reading The Kite Runner, written by Khalid Husseini. We stopped last time with Amir finally winning the kite tournament and fulfilling his wish, making his father proud. However, Hassan got harassed by Asif while he was trying to save Amir's prize. Amir never saved Hassan. Chapter 8. For a week, I barely saw Hassan. I woke up to find a toasted bread, brewed tea, and a boiled egg already on the kitchen table. My clothes for the day were ironed and folded, left on the crane seat chair in the foyer where Hassan usually did his ironing. He used to wait for me to sit at the breakfast table before he started ironing that way. We could talk. Used to sing too, over the hissing of the iron, sang old Hazara songs about tulip fields. Now only the folded clothes greeted me, and the breakfast I hardly finished anymore. One overcast morning, as I was pushing the boiled egg around on my plate, Ali walked in, cradling a pile of chopped wood. I asked him where Hassan was. He went back to sleep, Ali said, kneeling before the stove. He pulled this little square door open. Would Hassan be able to play today? Ali paused with a log in his hand. A worried look crossed his face. Lately, it seemed all he wants to do is to sleep. He does his chores, I see to that. But then, he just wants to crawl under his blanket. Can I ask you something? If you have to. After that kite tournament, he came home a little bloodied, and his shirt was torn. I asked him what had happened, and he said it was nothing, that he'd gotten into a little scuffle with some kids over the kite. I didn't say anything, just kept pushing the egg around my plate. Did something happen to him, Amir Agha? Something he's not telling me. I shrugged. How should I know? You would tell me, nay? Inshallah. You would tell me if something had happened. Like I said, how should I know what's wrong with him? I snapped. Maybe he's sick. People get sick all the time, Ali. Now, am I going to freeze to death, or are you planning to light the stove today? That night, I asked Baba if we could go to Jalalabad on Friday. He was rocking on the leather swivel chair behind his desk, reading a newspaper. He put it down, took off the reading glasses I disliked so much. Baba wasn't old, not at all, and he had lots of years left to live. So why did he have to wear those stupid glasses? Why not? He said. Lately, Baba agreed to everything I asked. Not only that, just 2 nights before, he'd asked me if I wanted to see El Cid with Charlton Heston at Cinema Ariana. Do you want to ask Hassan to come along to Jalalabad? Why did Baba have to spoil it like that? He's marid, I said, not feeling well. Really? Baba stopped rocking in his chair. What's wrong with him? I gave a shrug and sank in the sofa by the fireplace. He's got a cold or something. Ali says he's sleeping it off. I haven't seen much of Hassan the last few days, Baba said. That's all it is then, a cold. I couldn't help hating the way his brow furrowed with worry. Just a cold. So are we going Friday, Baba? Yes, Baba said, pushing away from the desk. Too bad about Hassan. I thought you might have had more fun if he came. Well, the two of us can have fun together, I said. Baba smiled, winked. Dress warm, he said. It should have been just the two of us. That was the way I wanted it. But by Wednesday night, Baba had managed to invite another 24 people. He called his cousin, Humayun. He was actually Baba's second cousin, and mentioned he was going to Jalalabad on Friday. And Humayun, who had studied engineering in France and had a house in Jalalabad, said he'd love to have everyone over. He'd bring the kids, his 2 wives, and while he was at it, cousin Shakifa and her family were visiting from Herat. Maybe she'd like to tag along. And since she was staying with cousin Nadir in Kabul, his family would have have to be invited as well, even though Humayun and Nader had a bit of a feud going, and if Nader was invited, surely his brother Farouk had to be asked too, and his feelings would be hurt if he might not invite them to his daughter's wedding next month, and so on. He filled 3 vans. I rode with Baba, Rahim Khan, Kaka Humayun. Baba had taught me at a young age to call any older male Kaka or uncle, and any older female Khala or aunt. Kaka Humayun's 2 wives rode with us too, the pinch-faced older one with the warts on her hands, and the younger one who always smelled of perfume and danced with her eyes closed, as did Kaka Humayun's twin girls. I sat in the back row, car sick and dizzy, sandwiched between the 7-year-old twins who kept reaching over my lap to slap at each other. The road to Jalalabad is a 2-hour trek through mountain roads winding along a steep drop, and my stomach lurched with each hairpin turn. Everyone in the van was talking loudly and at the same time, nearly shrieking, which is how Afghans talk. I asked one of the twins, Fazila and Karima. I could never tell which was which. If she traded her window seat with me so I could get fresh air on account of my car sickness. She stuck her tongue out and said no. I told her that was fine, but I couldn't be held accountable for vomiting on her new dress. A minute later, I was leaning out the window. I watched the cratered road rise and fall, whirl its tail around the mountainside, counted the multicolored trucks packed with squatting men lumbering past. I tried closing my eyes, letting the wind slap at my cheeks, opened my mouth to swallow the clean air. I still didn't feel better. A finger poked me in the side. It was Fazila, or Karima. What? I said. I was just telling everyone about the tournament, Baba said from behind the wheel. Kaka Humayun and his wives were smiling at me from the middle row of seats. There must have been 100 kites in the sky that day, Baba said. Is that about right, Amir? I guess so, I mumbled. 100 kites, Humayun John. No laugh. And the only one still flying at the end of the day was Amir's. He has the last kite at home, a beautiful blue kite. Hassan and Amir ran it together. Congratulations, Kaka Humayun said. His first wife, the one with the warts, clapped her hands. Wah wah, Amir Jan. We're all so proud of you, she said. The younger wife joined in. Then they were all clapping, yelping their praises, telling me how proud I'd made them all. Only Rahim Khan, sitting in the passenger seat next to Baba, was silent. He was looking at me in an odd way. Please pull over, Baba, I said. What? Getting sick, I muttered, leaning across the seat, pressing against Kaka Humayun's daughters, Fazila or Karima, face twisted. Pull over, Kaka. His face is yellow. I don't want him to throw up on my new dress, she squeaked. Baba began to pull over, but I didn't make it. A few minutes later, I was sitting on the rock on the side of the road as they aired around the van. Baba was smoking with Kaka Humayun, who was telling Fazila or Karima to stop crying. He'd buy her another dress in Jalalabad. I closed my eyes, turned my face to the sun. Little shapes formed behind my eyelids, like hands playing shadows on the wall. They twisted, merged, formed a single image. Hassan's brown corduroy pants, discarded on a pile of old bricks in the alley. Kaka Humayun's white 2-story house in Jalalabad had a balcony overlooking a large walled garden with apple and persimmon trees. There were hedges that, in the summer, the gardener shaped like animals, and a swimming pool with emerald-colored tiles. I sat on the edge of the pool, empty save for a layer of slushy snow at the bottom, feet dangling in. Kaka Humayun's kids were playing hide-and-seek at the other end of the yard. The women were cooking, and I could smell onions frying already. Could hear the pish-pish of a pressure cooker, music, laughter. Baba, Rahim Khan, Kaka Humayun, and Kaka Nadir were sitting on the balcony, smoking. Kaka Humayun was telling them he'd brought the projector along to show his slides of France, 10 years since he returned from Paris, and he was still showing those stupid slides. I shouldn't have felt this way anyway. Baba and I were finally friends. We'd gone to the zoo a few days before, seen Marjan the lion, and I hurled a pebble at the bear when no one was watching. We'd gone to the Khuda's kebab house afterward, across from Cinema Park, had lamb kebab with freshly baked naan from the tandoor. Baba told me stories about his travels to India and Russia, the people he had met, like the armless, legless couple in Bombay who'd been married 47 years and raised 11 children. That should have been fun, spending a day like that with Baba, hearing his stories. I finally had what I wanted all those years, except now I had it. I felt as empty as this unkempt pool I was dangling my legs into. The wives and daughters served dinner, rice kofta with chicken kawarma, at sundown. We dined the traditional way, sitting on cushions around the room, tablecloths spread on the floor, eating with our hands in groups of 4 or 5 from common platters. I wasn't hungry, but sat down to eat and with Baba, Kaka Farouk, and Kaka Humayun's 2 boys. Baba, who had a few scotches for dinner, was still ranting about the kite tournament, how I'd outlasted them all, how I'd come home with the last kite. His booming voice dominated the room. People raised their hats from their platters, called out their congratulations. Kaka Farouk patted my back with his clean hand. I felt like sticking a knife in my eye. Later, well past midnight, after a few hours of poker between Baba and his cousins, the men lay down to sleep on parallel mattresses in the same room where we'd dined. The women went upstairs. An hour later, I still couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning as my relatives grunted, sighed, and snored in their sleep. I sat up. A wedge of moonlight streamed in through the window. I watched Hassan get raped. I said to no one. Baba stirred in his sleep. Kaka Humayun grunted. A part of me was hoping someone would wake up and hear, so I wouldn't have to live with this lie anymore. But no one woke up, and in the silence that followed, I understood the nature of my new curse. I was going to get away with it. I thought about Hassan's dream, the one about swimming in the lake. There's no monster, he'd said, just water. Except he'd been wrong about that. There was a monster in the lake. It had grabbed Hassan by the ankles, dragged him to the murky bottom. I was that monster. That was the night I became an insomniac. I didn't speak to Hassan until the middle of the next week. I had just half eaten my lunch and Hassan was doing the dishes. I was walking upstairs, going to my room when Hassan asked if I wanted to hike up the hill. I said I was tired. Hassan looked tired too. He had lost weight and gray circles had formed under his puffed up eyes. But he asked again. I reluctantly agreed. We trekked up the hill, our boots squishing in the muddy snow. Neither one of us said anything. We sat under our pomegranate trees. I knew I'd made a mistake. I shouldn't have come up the hill. The words I carved up on the tree trunk with Ali's kitchen knife, Amir and Hassan, the sultans of Kabul. I couldn't stand looking at them now. He asked me to read to him from the Shahnameh, and I told him I'd changed my mind. Told him I just wanted to go back to my room. He looked away and shrugged. We walked back down the way we'd gone up in silence, and for the first time in my life, I couldn't wait for spring. My memory of the rest of that winter of 1975 was pretty hazy. I remember I was fairly happy when Baba was home. We'd eat together, go to see a film, visit Kaka Humayun or Kaka Farouk. Sometimes Rahim Khan came over and Baba let me sit in his study and sip tea with him. He'd even have me read him some of my stories. It was good, and I even believed it would last, and Baba believed too, I think. We both should have known better. For at least a few months after the kite tournament, Baba and I immersed ourselves in a sweet illusion, saw each other in a way that we never had before. We'd actually deceived ourselves into thinking that a toy made of tissue paper, glue, and bamboo could somehow close that chasm between us. But when Baba was out, and he was out a lot, I closed myself in my room. I read a book every couple of days, wrote stories, learned to draw horses. I'd hear Hassan shuffling around the kitchen in the morning, hear the clinking of silverware and the whistle of the teapot. I'd wait to hear the door shut, and only then I would walk down to eat. On my calendar I circled the date of the first day of school and began a countdown. To my dismay, Hassan kept trying to rekindle things between us. I remember the last time. I was in my room, reading an abbreviated Farsi translation of Ivanhoe, when he knocked on my door. "What is it?" "I'm going to the baker to buy naan," he said from the other side. "I was wondering if you wanted to come along." "I think I'm just going to read," I said, rubbing my temples. Lately, every time Hassan was around, I was getting a headache. "It's a sunny day," he said. "I can see that. Might be fun to go for a walk." "You go." "I wish you'd come along," he said, paused. Something thumped against the door. Maybe his forehead. "I don't know what I've done, Amir Agha. I wish you'd tell me. I don't know why we don't play anymore." "You haven't done anything, Hassan, just go. You can tell me I stopped doing it." I buried my head in my lap, squeezed my temples with my knees, like a vice. "I'll tell you what I want you to stop doing," I said, eyes pressed shut. "Anything. I want you to stop harassing me. I want you to go away," I snapped. I wished he would give it right back to me, break the door open and tell me off. It would have made things easier, better, but he didn't do anything like that. And when I opened the door a few minutes later, he wasn't there. I fell on my bed, buried my head under the pillow, and cried. Hassan milled about the periphery of my life after that. I made sure our paths crossed a little as possible, planned my day that way, because when he was around, the oxygen seeped out of the room. My chest tightened, and I couldn't draw enough air. I stand there, grasping in my own little airless bubble of atmosphere. But even when he wasn't around, he was. He was there in the hand-washed and ironed clothes and the cane seat chair, in the warm slippers left outside my door, in the wood already burning in the stove when I came down for breakfast. Everywhere I turned, I saw signs of his loyalty, his goddamn unwavering loyalty. Early that spring, a few days before this new school started, Baba and I were planting tulips in the garden. Most of the snow had melted, and the hills in the north were already dotted with patches of green grass. It was a cool grey morning, and Baba was squatting next to me, digging the soil and planting the bulbs I handed to him. He was telling me how most people thought it was better to plant tulips in the fall, and how that wasn't true, when I came right out and said it. "Baba, have you ever thought of getting new servants?" He dropped the tulip bulb and buried the trowel in the dirt, took off his gardening gloves. I'd startled him. "Chi, what did you say?" "I was just wondering, that's all." "Why would you ever want to do that?" Baba said curtly. "You wouldn't, I guess. It was just a question," I said, my voice fading to a murmur. I was already sorry I'd said that. Is that about you and Hassan? I know there's something going on between you two, but whatever it is, you have to deal with it, not me. I'm staying out of it. I'm sorry, Baba." He put the gloves again. "I grew up with Ali," he said through clenched teeth. "My father took him in. He loved Ali like his own son. 40 years Ali's been with my family. 40 goddamn years. And you think I'm just going to throw him out?" He turned to me now. His face was red as a tulip. "I've never laid a hand on you, Amir. But you ever say that again." He looked away, shaking his head. "You bring me shame. And Hassan's not going anywhere. Do you understand? I looked down and picked up a fistful of cool soil, let it pour between my fingers. I said, do you understand? Baba roared. I flinched. Yes, Baba. Hassan's not going anywhere, Baba snapped. He dug a new hole with his trowel, striking the dirt harder than he had to. He's staying right here with us. Where he belongs. This is his home, and we're his family. Don't you ever ask that question again. I won't, Baba. I'm sorry. We planted the rest of the tulips in silence. I was relieved when school started the next week. Students with new notebooks and sharpened pencils in hand ambled around the courtyard, kicking up dust, chatting in groups, waiting for the class captain's whistles. Baba drove down the dirt lane that led to the entrance. The school was an old, two-storied building with broken windows and dim cobblestone hallways, patched of its original dull yellow paint still showing between sloughing chunks of plaster. Most of the boys walked to school, and Baba's black Mustang drew more than one envious look. I should have been beaming with pride when he dropped me off. The old me would have, but all I could muster was a mild form of embarrassment. That and emptiness. Baba drove away without saying goodbye. I bypassed the customary comparing of kite fighters' cars and stood in line. The bell rang and we marched to our assigned classes, filmed in pairs. I sat in the back row, as the Farsi teacher handed out our textbooks. I prayed for a heavy load of homework. School gave me an excuse to stay in my room for long hours, and for a while it took my mind off what had happened that winter. What I had let happen. For a few weeks I preoccupied myself with gravity and momentum, atoms and cells, the Anglo-Afghan wars, instead of thinking about Hassan and what had happened to him. But always my mind returned to that alley, to Hassan's brown corduroy pants lying on the bricks, to the droplets of blood staining the snow, dark red, almost black. One sluggish, hazy afternoon early that summer, I asked Hassan to go up the hill with me. Told him I wanted to read him a new story I'd written. He was hanging close to dry in the yard, and I saw his eagerness in the hurried way he finished the job. We climbed the hill, making small talk. He asked about school, what I was learning, and I talked about my teacher, especially the mean math teacher who punished talkative students by sticking a metal rod between their fingers and then squeezing them together. Hassan winced at that, said he'd hoped I'd never have to experience that. I said I'd been lucky so far, knowing that luck had nothing to do with it. I had done my share of talking in classes too, but my father was rich and everyone knew him, so I was spared the metal rod treatment. We sat against the low cemetery wall under the shade thrown by the pomegranate tree. In another month or two, crops of scorched yellow weeds would blanket this hillside. But that year, the spring shower had lasted longer and usual, nudging their way into early summer, and the grass was still green, peppered with tangles of wildflowers. Below us, Wazir Akbar Khan's white-walled, flat-topped houses gleamed into the sunshine, the laundry hanging on cloths line in the yard stirred by the breeze to dance like butterflies. We had picked a dozen pomegranates from the tree. I unfolded the story I brought along, turned the first page, and then put it down. I stood up and picked up an overripe pomegranate that had fallen to the ground. "What would you do if I hit you with this?" I said, tossing the fruit up and down. Hassan smiled, wilted. He looked older than I remembered. No, not older. Old. Was that possible? Lines had etched into his tanned face, and creases framed his eyes, his mouth. I might as well have taken a knife and carved those lines myself. "What would you do?" I repeated. The color fell from his face. Next to him, the stapled pages of the story I promised to read him fluttered in the breeze. I hurled the pomegranate at him. It struck him in the chest, exploded a spray of red pulp. Hassan's cry was pregnant with surprise and pain. "Hit me back!" I snapped. Hassan looked from the stain on his chest to me. "Get up! Hit me!" I said. Hassan did get up, but he just stood there, looking dazed like a man dragged into the ocean by a riptide when, just a moment ago, he was enjoying a nice stroll on the beach. I hit him with another pomegranate in the shoulder this time. The juice splattered his face. "Hit me back!" I spat. "Hit me back, goddamn you!" I wished he would. I wished he would give me the punishment I craved, so maybe I'd finally sleep at night. Maybe then things could return to how they used to be between us. But Hassan did nothing, as I pelted him again and again. "You're a coward," I said. "Nothing but a goddamn coward." I don't know how many times I hit him. All I know is that when I finally stopped, exhausted and panting, Hassan was smeared in red, like he'd been shot by a firing squad. I fell to my knees, tired, spent, frustrated. Then Hassan did pick up a pomegranate. He walked toward me. He opened it, crushed it against his own forehead. "There," he croaked, red dripping down his face like blood. "Are you satisfied? Do you feel better?" He turned around and started down the hill. I let the tears break free, rocked back and forth on my knees. "What am I going to do with you, Hassan? What am I going to do with you?" But by the time the tears dried up and I trudged down the hill, I knew the answer to that question. I turned 13 that summer of 1976, Afghanistan's next to last summer of peace and anonymity. Things between Baba and me were already cooling off again. I think I started. It was the stupid comment I'd made the day we were planting tulips about getting new servants. I regretted saying it. I really did, but I didn't think I hadn't. But I think if I hadn't, our happy little interlude would have come to an end. Maybe not quite so soon, but it would have. By the end of the summer, the scraping of spoons and forks against the plate had replaced dinner table chatter, and Baba had resumed retreating to his study after supper and closing the door. I'd gone back to the thumbing through Hafiz and Khayyam, gnawing my nails down to the cuticles, writing stories. I kept the stories in a stack under my bed, keeping them just in case, though I doubted Baba would ever ask me again to read them to him. Baba's motto about throwing parties was this: invite the whole world, or it's not a party. I remember scanning over the invitation list a week before my birthday party, and not recognizing at least 3/4 of the 400 plus kakas and khalas who were going to bring me gifts and congratulate me for having lived to turn 30. Then I realized they weren't really coming for me. It was my birthday, but I knew who the real star of the show was. For days, the house was teeming with Baba's hired help. There was Salahuddin the butcher, who showed up with a calf and 2 sheep in tow, refusing payment for any of the 3. He slaughtered the animals himself in the yard by a poplar tree. "Blood is good for the tree," I remember him saying as the grass around the poplar soaked red. Men I didn't know climbed the oak trees with coils of small electric bulbs and meters of extension cords. Others set up dozens of tables in the yard, spread a tablecloth on each. The night before the big party, Baba's friend Del Muhammad, who owned a kebab house in Sharennu, came to the house with his bags of spices. Like the butcher, Del Muhammad, or Dalo, as Baba called him, refused payment for his services. He said Baba had done enough for his family already. It was Rahim Khan who whispered to me, as Dalo marinated the meat, that Baba had lent Dalo the money to open his restaurant. Baba had refused repayment until Dalo had shown up one day in our driveway in a Benz and insisted he wouldn't leave until Baba took his money. I guess in most ways, or at least in the ways in which parties are judged, my birthday bash was a huge success. I'd never seen the house so packed. Guests with drinks in their hands were chatting in the hallways, smoking on the stairs, leaning against doorways. They sat where they found space, on kitchen counters, in the foyer, even under the stairwell. In the backyard, they mingled under the glow of red, blue, green lights winking in the trees, their faces illuminated by the light of kerosene torches propped everywhere. Baba had a stage built on the balcony that overlooked the garden and planted speakers throughout the yard. Ahmed Zahir was playing an accordion and singing on the stage over masses of dancing bodies. I had to greet each of the guests personally. Baba made sure of that. No one was going to gossip the next day about how he'd raised the son with no manners. I kissed hundreds of cheeks, hugged total strangers, thanked them for their gifts. My face ached from the strain of my plastered smile. I was standing with Baba in the yard near the bar when someone said, "Happy birthday, Amir." It was Asif, with his parents. Asif's father, Mahmoud, was a short, lanky, sort of dark skin and a narrow face. His mother, Tanya, was a small, nervous woman who smiled and blinked a lot. Asif was standing between the two of them, grinning, looming over both, his arms resting on their shoulders. He led them toward us, like he had brought them here, like he was the parent, and they were his children. A wave of dizziness rushed through me. Baba thanked them for coming. "I picked out your present myself," Asif said. Tanya's face twitched, and her eyes flicked from Asif to me. She smiled unconvincingly and blinked. I wondered if Baba had noticed. "Still playing soccer, Asif Jan," Baba said. He'd always wanted me to be friends with Asif. Asif smiled. It was creepy how genuinely sweet he made it look. "Of course, Kaka John. Right wing, as I recall. Actually, I switched to center forward this year," Asif said. "You get to score more that way. We're playing the Macro Ryan team next week. Should be a good match. They have some good players." Baba nodded. "You know, I played center forward too when I was young." "I'll bet you still could if you wanted to," Asif said. He favored Baba with a good-natured wink. Baba returned the wink. "I see your father has taught you his world-famous flattering ways." He elbowed Asif's father, almost knocked the little fellow down. Mahmoud's laughter was about as convincing as Tanya's smile, and suddenly I wondered if maybe on some level their son frightened them. I tried to fake a smile, but all I could manage was a feeble turning on the corners of my mouth. My stomach was turning at the sight of my father bonding with Asif. Asif shifted his eyes to me. "Wadi and Kamal are here too. They wouldn't miss your birthday for anything," he said, laughter lurking just beneath the surface. I nodded silently. "We're thinking about playing a little game of volleyball tomorrow at my house," Asif said. "Maybe you'll join us too. Bring Hassan if you want." That sounds fun, Baba said, beaming. "What do you think, Amir?" "I don't really like volleyball," I muttered. I saw the light wink out of Baba's eyes, and an uncomfortable silence followed. "Sorry, Asif Jan," Baba said, shrugging. That stung, his apologizing for me. "Nay, no harm done," Asif said. "But you have an open invitation, Amir Jan. Anyway, I heard you like to read, so I bought you a book, one of my favorites." He extended a wrapped birthday gift to me. "Happy birthday." He was dressed in cotton shirt and blue slacks, a red silk tie, and shiny black loafers. He smelled of cologne, and his blonde hair was neatly combed back. On the surface, he was the embodiment of every parent's dream, a strong, tall, well-dressed, well-mannered boy with talent and striking looks, not to mention the wit to joke with an adult. But to me, his eyes betrayed him. When I looked up into them, the facade faltered, revealed a glimpse of the madness hiding behind them. "Aren't you going to take it, Amir?" Baba was saying. Huh? Your present, he said, testily. Asif Jan's giving you a present. Oh, I said. I took the box from Asif and lowered my gaze. I wished I could be alone in my room with my books, away from all these people. Well, Baba said. What? Baba spoke in a low voice, the one he took on whenever I embarrassed him in public. Aren't you going to thank Asif Jan? That was very considerate of him. I wished Baba would stop calling him that. How often did he call me Amir Jan? Thanks, I said. Asif's mother looked at me like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. I realized that neither of Asif's parents had said a word. Before I could embarrass myself and Baba anymore, but mostly to get away from Asif and his grin, I stepped away. Thanks for coming, I said. I squirmed my way through the throng of guests and slipped through the wrought iron gates. 2 houses down from my house, there was a large barren dirt lot. I heard Baba tell Rahim Khan that a judge had bought the land and that an architect was working on that design. For now, the lot was bare, save for dirt, stone, and weeds. I tore the wrapping paper from Asif's present and tilted the book cover in the moonlight. It was a biography of Hitler. I threw it amid a tangle of weeds. I leaned against the neighbor's wall, slid down to the ground. I just sat in the dark for a while, knees drawn to my chest, looking up the stars, waiting for the night to be over. Shouldn't you be entertaining your guests? A familiar voice said. Rahim Khan was walking towards me along the wall. They don't need me for that. Baba's there, remember? I said. The ice in Rahim Khan's drink clinked when he sat next to me. I didn't know you drank. Turns out I do, he said, elbowed me playfully, but only on the most important occasions. I smiled. Thanks. He tipped his drink to me, and I took a sip. He lit a cigarette, one of the unfiltered Pakistani cigarettes he and Baba were always smoking. Did I ever tell you I was married once? I was almost married once. Really? I said, smiling a little at the notion of Rahim Khan getting married. I'd always thought of him as Baba's quiet alter ego, my writing mentor, my pal, the one who never forgot to bring me a souvenir when he returned from a trip abroad. But a husband, a father? He nodded. It's true. I was 18. Her name was Humaira. She was a Hazara, the daughter of our neighbor's servants. She was as beautiful as Petty. Light brown hair, big hazel eyes. She had this laugh. I can still hear it sometimes. He twirled the glass. We used to meet secretly in my father's apple orchards. Always after midnight, when everybody had gone to sleep. We'd walk under the trees, and I'd hold her hand. Am I embarrassing you, Amir Jan? A little, I said. It won't clean, he said, taking another puff. Anyway, we had this fantasy. We'd have a great fancy wedding and invite family and friends from Kabul to Kandahar. I would build us a big house, white with tiled fascia and large windows. We would plant fruit trees in the garden and grow all sorts of flowers, have a lawn for our kids to play on. On Fridays after namaz at the mosque, everyone would get together at our house for lunch, and we'd eat in the garden under cherry trees. Drink fresh water from the well, then tea with candy as we watched our kids play with their cousins. He took a long gulp of his scotch, coughed. You should have seen the look on my father's face when I told him. My mother actually fainted. My sister splashed her face with water. They fanned her and looked at me as if I slit her throat. My brother Jalal actually went to fetch his hunting rifle before my father stopped him. Rahim Khan barked a little after. It was Humaira and me against the world. And I'll tell you this, Amir Jan, in the end, but the world always wins. That's just the way of things. So what happened? That same day, my father put Humayra and her family on a lorry and sent them to Hazarajat. I never saw her again. I'm sorry, I said. Probably for the best though, Rahim Khan said, shrugging. She would have suffered. My family would have never accepted her as an equal. You don't order someone to polish your shoes one day and call them sister the next. He looked at me. You know, you can tell me anything you want to me, John. Anytime. I know, I said, uncertainly. He looked at me for a long time, like he was waiting, as his black bottomless eyes hinting and at an unspoken secret between us. For a moment, I almost did tell him, almost told him everything. But then what would he think of me? He'd hate me, and rightfully. Here, he handed me something. I almost forgot. Happy birthday. It was a brown leather-bound notebook. I traced my fingers along the gold-colored stitching on the borders. I smelled the leather. For your stories, he said. I was going to thank him when something exploded and burst of fire lit up the sky. Fireworks! We hurried back to the house and found the guests all standing in the yard, looking up to the sky. Kids hooted and screaming with each crackle and whoosh. People cheered, burst into applause each time flares sizzled in and exploded into bouquets of fire. Every few seconds, the backyard lit up in sudden flash of red, green, and yellow. In those brief bursts of light, I saw something I'll never forget. Hassan serving drinks to Asif and Wali from a silver platter. The light winked out, a hiss and a crackle. Then another flicker of orange light. Asif grinning, kneeing Hassan in the chest with a knuckle. Then, mercifully, darkness. Chapter 9. Sitting in the middle of my room the next morning, I ripped open box after box of presents. I didn't know why I even bothered, since I gave them a joyless glance and pitched them into the corner of the room. The pile was growing there: a Polaroid camera, a transistor radio, an elaborate electric train set, and several sealed envelopes containing cash. I knew I'd never spend the money or listen to the radio, and the electric train would never treadle down its tracks in my room. I'd never want any of it. It was all blood money. Baba would never have thrown me a party like that if I hadn't won the tournament. Baba gave me 2 presents. One was sure to become the envy of every kid in the neighborhood: a brand new Stingray, the king of all bicycles. Only a handful of kids in Kabul owned a new Stingray, and now I was one of them. It had high-rise handlebars with black rubber grips, and its famous banana seat. The spokes were gold colored, and the steel frame bloody red, like a candy apple or blood. And any other kid would have hopped on the bike immediately and take it for a full block skid. I might have done the same a few months ago. You like it? Baba said, leaning in the doorway to my room. I gave him a sheepish grin and a quick thank you. I wish I could have mustered more. We could go for a ride, Baba said, an invitation, but only a half-hearted one. Maybe later. I'm a little tired, I said. Sure, Baba said. Baba? Yes. Thanks for the fireworks, I said. A thank you, but only a half-hearted one. Get some rest, Baba said, walking towards his room. The other present Baba gave me, and he didn't wait around for me to open this one, was a wristwatch. It had a blue face with gold hands in the shape of lightning bolts. I didn't even try it on. I tossed it on the pile of toys in the corner. The only gift I hadn't tossed on the mount was Rahim Khan's leather-bound notebook. That was the only one I didn't feel like blood money. I sat on the edge of my bed, turned the notebook in my hands, thought about what Rahim Khan had said about Humayra, how his father dismissing her had been the best and she would have suffered like the times Kaka Humayun projectors got stuck on the same slide, and the same image kept flashing in my mind over and over. Hassan, his head downcast, serving drinks to Asif and Wali. Maybe it would be for the best. Lessen his suffering, and mine too. Either way, this much had become clear. One of us had to go. Later that afternoon, I took the bicycle for its first and last spin. I pedaled around the block a couple of times and came back. I rolled up the driveway to the backyard where Hassan and Ali were cleaning up the mess from last night's party. Paper cups, crumpled napkins, and empty bottles of soda littered the yard. Ali was folding chairs, setting them along the wall. He saw me and waved. "Salam, Ali," I said, waving back. He held up a finger, asking me to wait, and walked up his living quarters. A moment later, he emerged with something in his hands. The opportunity never presented itself last night, and Hassan and me. "I wanted to give you this," he said, handing me a box. It's modest and not worthy of you, Amir Agha, but we hope you like it. Happy birthday." A lump was rising in my throat. "Thank you, Ali," I said. I wished they hadn't bought me anything. I opened the box and found a brand new Shahnameh, a hardback with glossy colored illustrations beneath the passages. And of course, Rustam, inflicting a mortal wound onto his son, the warrior Sahra. "It's beautiful," I said. "Hassan said your copy was old and ragged, and that some of the pages were missing," Ali said. All the pictures are hand-drawn, and this one with pen and ink," he added proudly, eyeing a book neither he nor his son could read. "It's lovely," I said, and it was, and I suspected not inexpensive either. I wanted to tell Ali it was not the book, but I who was unworthy. I hopped back on the bicycle. "Thank Hassan for me," I said. I ended up tossing the book on the heap of gifts in the corner of my room, but my eyes kept going back to it, so I buried it at the bottom. Before I went to bed that night, I asked Baba if he'd seen my new watch anywhere. The next morning, I waited in my room for Ali to clear the breakfast table in the morning, waited for him to do the dishes, wipe the counters. I looked out my bedroom window and waited until Ali and Hassan went grocery shopping to the bazaar, pushing the empty wheelbarrows in front of them. Then I took a couple of envelopes of cash from the pile of gifts and my watch and tiptoed out. I paused before Baba's study and listened in. He's been here all morning, making phone calls. He was talking to someone now about a shipment of rugs due to arrive next week. I went downstairs, crossed the yard, and entered Ali and Hassan's living quarters by the loquat tree. I lifted Hassan's mattress and planted my new watch and a handful of Afghani bills under it. I waited another 30 minutes. Then I knocked on Baba's door and told him what I hoped would be the last of a long line of shameful lies. Through my bedroom window, I watched Ali and Hassan push the wheelbarrows loaded with meat, naan, fruit and vegetables up the driveway. I saw Baba emerge from the house and walk up to Ali. Their mouths moved over, words I couldn't hear. Baba pointed to the house and Ali nodded. They separated. Baba came back to the house. Ali followed Hassan to their hut. A few moments later, Baba knocked on my door. "Come to my office," he said. "We're all going to sit down and settle this thing." I went to Baba's study, sat in one of the leather sofas. It was 30 minutes or more before Hassan and Ali joined us. They'd both been crying. I could tell from their red, puffed up eyes. They stood before, hand in hand, and I wondered how and when could I become capable of causing this kind of pain. Baba came right out and asked, "Did you steal that money? Did you steal Amir's watch, Hassan?" Hassan replied with a single word delivered with a thin, raspy voice. "Yes." I flinched, like I'd been slapped. My heart sank and I almost blurted out the truth. Then I understood. this was Hassan's final sacrifice for me. If he'd said no, Baba would have believed him, because we all knew Hassan never told lies. And if Baba believed him that I'd be accused, I would have to explain. I would have I would be revealed for what I really was. Baba would never ever forgive me, and that led to another understanding. Hassan knew. Hassan knew. He knew I'd seen everything in that alley. He'd understood that I stood there and done nothing. He knew I had betrayed him, and yet he was rescuing me once again, maybe for the last time. I loved him in that moment, loved him more than I'd ever loved anyone, and I wanted to tell him that all that I was a snake in the grass, the monster in the lake. I wasn't worthy of the sacrifice. I was a liar, a cheat, a thief, and I would have told, except that a part of me was glad that this would all be over soon. Baba would dismiss them. There would be some pain, but life would move on. I wanted them to move on, to forget, to start with a clean slate. I wanted to be able to breathe again, except Baba stunned me by saying, I forgive you. Forgive? But theft was the one unforgivable sin, the common denominator of all sins. When you kill a man, you steal a life. When you kill a wife, you steal his husband's right to a husband, rob his children of a father. When you tell a lie, you steal someone's right to tell the truth. When you cheat, you steal the right to fairness. There is no act more wretched than stealing. Hadn't Baba sat me on his lap and said those words to me, then how could he just forgive Hassan? And if Baba could forgive that, then why couldn't he forgive me for not being the son he had always wanted? Why? We're leaving Agha Sahib, Ali said. What? Baba said. The color drained from his face. We can't live here anymore, Ali said. But I forgive him, Ali. Didn't you hear? Said Baba. Life here is impossible for us now, Agha Sahib. We're leaving. Ali drew Hassan to him, curled his arm around his son's shoulder. It was a protective gesture, and I knew whom Ali was protecting him from. Ali glanced my way, and in his cold, unforgiving look, I saw that Hassan had told him. He had told him everything about what Asif and his friends had done to him, about the kite, about me. Strangely, I was glad that someone knew me for who I really was. I was tired of pretending. I don't care about the money or the watch, Baba said, his arms open, palms up. I don't understand why you're doing this. Why do you mean impossible? I'm sorry, Agha Sahib, but our bags are already packed. We have made our decision. Baba stood up, a sheen of grief across his face. Ali, haven't I provided wealth for you? Haven't I been good to you and Hassan? You're the brother I've never had. Ali, you know that. Please don't do this. Don't make this even more difficult than it already is, Agha Sahib, Ali said. His mouth twitched, and for a moment I thought I saw a grimace. That was when I understood the depth of the pain I had caused, the blackness of the grief I had brought onto everyone. That not even Ali's paralyzed face could mask his sorrow. I forced myself to look at Hassan, but his head was downcast, his shoulders slumped, and his fingers twirling and a loose string on the hem of his shirt. Baba was pleading now. At least tell me why. I need to know. Ali didn't tell Baba, just as he didn't protest when Hassan confessed to the stealing. I'll never really know why, but I could imagine the two of them in that dim little hut weeping, Hassan pleading him not to give me away. But I couldn't imagine the restraint it must have taken Ali to keep that promise. Will you drive us to the bus station? I forbid you to do this, Baba bellowed. Do you hear me? I forbid you, respectfully. You can't forbid me anything, Agha Sahib, Ali said. We don't work for you anymore. Where will you go? Baba asked, his voice breaking. Hazarajat. To your cousin? Yes. Will you take us to the bus station, Agha Sahib? Then I saw Baba do something I've never seen him do before. He cried. It scared me a little. Seeing a grown man sob. Fathers weren't supposed to cry. Please, Baba was saying. But Ali had already turned to the door, Hassan trailing him. I'll never forget the way Baba had said that. The pain in his plea, the fear. In Kabul, it rarely rained in the summer. Blue sky stood far and far, the sun like a branding iron searing the back of our necks. Creeks where Hassan and I skipped stones, all spring turning dry, and rickshaws stirred dust when they spluttered by. People went to mosques for their 10 rakats of noontime prayer, and then retreated to whatever shade they would find to nap in, waiting for the cool and early evening. Summer month-long school days, sweating in tightly packed, poorly ventilated classrooms, learned to recite ayats from the Quran, struggling with those tongue-twisting exotic Arabic words. It meant catching flies near a pond while the mullah drowned on and a hot breeze brought with it the smell of from the outhouse across the schoolyard, churning dust around the lone rickety basketball hoop. But it rained that afternoon. Baba took Ali and Hassan to the bus station. Thunderheads rolled in, painted the sky iron gray. Within minutes, sheets of rain were sweeping in. The steady hiss of falling water swelled in my ears. Baba had offered them to drive them to Bamiyan himself, but Ali refused. Through the blurry, rain-soaked window of my bedroom, I watched Ali haul the lone suitcase carrying all of their belongings to Baba's car, idling outside the gates. Hassan lugged his mattress, rode tightly, and tied a rope. On his back, he'd left all his toys behind. In the empty shack, I discovered them the next day, piled in the corner just like my birthday presents in my room. Slithering beads of rain sluiced down my window. I saw Baba slam the trunk shut, always drenched. He walked to the driver's side, leaned in, and said something to Ali in the back seat. Perhaps one last-ditch effort to change his mind. They talked that way a while, Baba getting soaked, stooping, one arm on the roof of the car. But when he straightened, I saw in his slumping shoulders that the life I had once known I'd been born was over. Baba slid in. The headlights came on and cut twin funnels of light in the rain. If this were one of the Hindi movies Hassan and I used to watch, this was the part where I'd run outside, my bare feet splashing rainwater. I chased the car, screaming for it to stop. I pulled Hassan out of the backseat and told him I was sorry, so sorry, my tears mixing with the rainwater. We tugged in the downpour, but this was no Hindi movie. I was sorry, but I didn't cry, and I didn't chase the car. I watched Baba's car pull away from the curb, taking with it the person whose first spoken word had been my name. I caught one final blurry glimpse of Hassan slumped in the back seat before Baba turned left at the street corner where we'd played marbles so many times. I stepped back, and all I saw was rain through window panes that looked like melting silver. This concludes our reading of The Kite Runner from Off the Shelf. Your reader has been Hiba Had. Thank you.